Thank you. I want to introduce Nancy Steiger. Nancy is been a customer of ours. She's probably one of the most fascinating customers I've ever had. I met Nancy, I don't know how many years ago, probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And she's a visionary. She was very clear what she wanted. Not every customer is that clear. She was the CEO, and she did her own work. She investigated our organization. She called our customers. She didn't rely on her people to call her customers. She wanted to know that firsthand. She is a consummate expert in healthcare. She's been CEO of multiple hospitals and systems. I asked Nancy, as a friend, to come up and speak to you all on why she selected Thomas Cuisine. What's important in a provider? And that's important for us to understand. Where is healthcare going? Tell me, it's probably the most of the three segments, the most changing environment we're in right now, and the most challenge for our organization, because they're under a lot of change and a lot of pressure. So we'll speak to that. And then, she's an expert leader. So a little bit about leadership today too. So welcome, Nancy. Thank you for coming. Turn it over to you.
Well, it's really wonderful to be here today and to see some old friends. It's really nice to have that as a bonus. And as Mark said, he asked me to talk about the voice of the customer, which I will do. And I will do it through the lens of mission, vision, values, which I think Mark has nicely laid out. And hopefully that will help make some connections for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future and then the call to leadership, and hopefully give you some tools to leave with to help you lead this very awesome mission, vision, and values. So I should start this talk by telling you that I'm a foodie. And when I walked in this morning and I saw the spread, I was like, wow. Because I like to say the first bite is with your eyes. And when you look at that spread this morning, that first bite was with your eyes. When you looked at all the fresh food and you looked at, I never saw Boursin cheese on eggs. I mean, this was just a beautiful thing. So I'm a foodie. I love food. And whenever I travel, the first thing I do is I look at restaurants. You know how important food is, not just for nourishment, but it's because it's always on people's minds. Always on people's minds. So with that as backdrop, I arrived in Bellingham in July of 2007 as the CEO of St. Joseph Medical Center. St. Joseph Medical Center was founded by a group of nuns, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. Sister Margaret Anna Cusick, also known as Mother Clare, was committed to serving the poor and the vulnerable. The sisters were, quote, called to Bellingham to meet the needs of the loggers and miners. 2 young nuns came from Europe. Imagine this. They took a train across the United States and then up the Northwest to Bellingham. I'm told they had something like $18 in their pocket. How did they do this? And where did they know how to start? Where did they find the courage? Remember, they were 18 years old, and I don't know if you're ever around an 18-year-old, but for me, when I think of 18-year-olds doing what those 2 young nuns did, I'm pretty stupefied. But it seems impossible and has been a source of inspiration to me when I find myself not knowing what to do. I think about what those 2 18-year-olds did to meet the needs of the loggers and miners. So they did many things in the community, providing service and education, especially to the poor and vulnerable, including building schools in what is now known as St. Joseph Medical Center. They knew how because their ministry, their work, was rooted in meeting the needs of the loggers and the miners. Later known as Peace Health, they adopted a mission statement. I still remember that mission statement, and I've been gone for more than 3 years. We carry on the healing mission of Jesus Christ by promoting personal and community health, relieving pain and suffering, and treating each person in a loving and caring way. This is a very powerful mission statement, and I want to share a few things about it. One of the most important aspects of this mission statement is it starts with the word we. It's not the sisters, it's you and it's me. We carry on this healing mission. And it is a healing mission, and it's focused on promoting health and relieving pain and suffering, and treating each person in a loving and caring way. So even if you're not Catholic, this mission is very ecumenical because it's about treating the poor and the vulnerable and treating them in a loving and caring way. So with that as backdrop, I also felt called to Bellingham to be part of this rich history and service of meeting the needs of the community, a community where people actually cared more about the community than they did themselves. Very strange. In fact, I turned down a job at Sharp Memorial in San Diego in large part due to the rich history and palpable mission, vision, and values of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. But I was more than surprised to find the myriad of challenges that I faced when I arrived. The problems and priorities not obvious during the interview process, and I found myself deeply immersed in getting a handle on what needed to be done, from assessing the team to the organization, from staffing and safety and quality and operations and governance and so much more. But at the same time, it was clear that food had not been a priority. No one ate in the cafeteria. I mean, no one ate in the cafeteria. You walked in, it was dead. And the patient feedback, it was terrible. It was terrible consistently. The kitchen had not had attention. Joel remembers this. Everything was old and in disrepair. Significant capital was required to address these problems. However, the demand for capital was so high that there were so many other greater problems and priorities that even for a foodie like me, food did not hit the top list of things for me to do. And that's a surprise because I told you I really am a foodie, but this was not my top priority. Until, in the end of my second year as CEO, I was hospitalized. I was hospitalized with gallbladder pancreatitis. I spent 11 days in the hospital. On my 10th day, and this was on a readmission, I was finally fed on my 10th day. I had no food, no enteral feeding, and the very first meal I was served, you won't believe this, sweet and sour microwave chicken with burnt rice and soggy, cold, previously frozen broccoli. Can you imagine this? No food in 10 days. Need I say more? Not only could I not eat that, but it looked and smelled so terrible that my hungry husband was disinterested in this cold, rubbery, oversauced meal. And this is the point when I was seriously done with the problems we were facing at food at St. Joseph Medical Center. So I was determined to solve this problem and delegated the bidding process to the CEO, but I stayed very closely involved, as Mark mentioned, because I was not sure that he saw food the same way I did, and I don't think he really appreciated the myriad of opportunities that were in front of us connecting food and the patient experience. I still remember the Thomas Cuisine presentation and the very stark contrast between Aramark, the current and alternative provider. Rubbery chicken, canned and frozen vegetables and fruit versus food, hand-chopped, beautifully presented. And as I always say, the first bite is with your eyes, and that was my first bite. The visual, not only this morning when I walked in, but I still remember that visual presentation that was made to us when we were considering Thomas Cuisine. It was very clear that Mark and the team also loved food. They love food, you can tell. And they were just as interested in helping me solve my problem. But it wasn't just from a vendor perspective. It wasn't just to get another contract for Thomas Cuisine, although, of course, everybody wants more business. You could tell their deep and sincere interest in helping me as the CEO. It was their passion for food, not just as nourishment, but as a part of the patient experience that was really obvious and palpable. And their passion for food and the food experience was more than obvious. It was, as I mentioned, palpable. And ultimately, it was the deciding factor to switch from Aramark to Thomas Cuisine. Of course, money and cost were a part of the evaluation for both of us, but their passion and commitment to food as part of the patient experience and the caregiver experience was a major part of my decision making. I can't emphasize this enough. I needed to get that right. I wanted people to see and to feel, from an experience perspective, my commitment to food as healing. And while some people think about this as outsourcing, I bought into the idea of insourcing expertise we lacked and that Thomas Cuisine clearly excelled at. Once the agreement was finalized, the next and perhaps more essential piece was to carefully and fully integrate Thomas Cuisine staff into our team. This required deep immersion in our mission, our vision, and values of the organization. Recall, the mission was to promote personal and community health and treat each person in a loving and caring way. It was important that Thomas Cuisine staff bought into this, as well as to our values and our vision. And in the very first presentation, we could see and feel the commitment, their own commitment to health and treating everyone in a loving and caring way. I'll talk more about the importance of mission, vision, and values later, and I hope you don't get tired of me talking about that, because that really is the way I see leadership. Going forward, this also required St. Joseph Medical Center to see Thomas Cuisine as part of the team, not as a vendor, to see them as part of us. And this is important. It goes both ways. It's not a one-way proposition. It requires deep immersion as well as commitment on both parts. There's no halfway, there's no superficial aspect to this commitment. As I look back today, this was one of the best decisions that I made during my tenure. Why? I'm going to pause for a minute and see if any of you have any thoughts about why, as a CEO, I thought this was a good decision. Pardon? Because it impacted everybody. Other thoughts? Come on, there's nothing left for last time. I'm going to ask for your feedback. And I'll just stand here, so. Say what? There was alignment with our values. Yeah, say value alignment. Good. Say again. They became part of, or you became part of our own brand promise, for sure. Well, I have a long list of things that I want to share with you that exemplify the points that you have all just made. Here are a few examples. First and foremost, our caregivers stopped going out for lunch and started eating in the cafeteria. So this made them feel cared for and nourished in ways they hadn't before, that we cared enough to offer food that would make them want to not go out but to stay in. And they didn't have to leave the building, so the time they took for meals was less, which increased productivity. There's a win that I didn't really expect. The cafeteria and Grounds and Grains became a meeting place, and people connected with each other over food. This increased teamness in ways I never really predicted. I still, to this day, it's like, why didn't I think about that? But people who'd worked there for years, maybe decades, old friends, hadn't seen each other in a long time, started actually meeting for lunch at work. It sounds like it's not a novel concept, but it was such a novel concept that people actually got to connect with friends at work. People ate healthier foods. We got rid of the deep fryer and sodas and other things like that, and in words and deeds committed to the health of our caregivers and our community. Okay, get this one. People came to eat at the hospital who had no other business in the hospital. Do you often see that? I mean, maybe you do. For me, it was a shock. The menu improved significantly. The Thomas Cuisine leadership became a partner more than our own previous leaders. They really were part of the team. Okay, the food revenue increased. The patient satisfaction went up. They put flowers on the table. The whole vibe in the cafeteria changed. Remember, nobody was in the cafeteria. And not only was it full, but it was like a buzz and an energy, and it was like a place you wanted to be. The costs went down. We bought local. We had a farm market. There was an article in the Bellingham Herald that said the best food in Bellingham was at the hospital. Again, have you seen that before? Because I have not. That was really a great headline. I had lots of catered events. I had board meetings, team meetings, I had barbecues, and these catered events, we also had a huge fundraiser for, I don't know, thousands of people. And the level of service and quality of the food at these events was so far beyond anything people in Bellingham had seen. It's like, this is Bellingham? Are you sure we're not in Seattle? I mean, it was really that much of a difference. But I believe that the team also felt that these events were a reflection of me as the leader, and they wanted to make sure the events were a good reflection of me. And I can't say that enough. I mean, these are very subtle things, but as a leader, you can't tell somebody, I want you to do this to be a good reflection of me, but that was a byproduct. So looking back, this really was one of the best decisions we made for our patients, our staff, and for the whole community. So I want to move on to mission, vision, and values, and I want to tell you a little bit about why. I'm a big believer and proponent that mission, vision, and values is the filter and screen for everything we do. And Mark really nicely laid out your mission, values, and promise as a construct for what you're doing. It's beautifully done, but I think it also needs to go to everybody in the organization. It can't just be from Mark. All of us have to be looking and talking through the construct of mission, vision, and values. It's a way of explaining what we do, and it's a way of explaining what we don't do. I think about mission as the roots of the organization. It's the roots. It's the why. I don't know if you've read Simon Sinek, but he says start with why. To me, start with mission. Mission is the why. It's the roots. It's through which everything else comes. The vision is the wings of the organization, and it's the where you're trying to go. And it needs to be audacious, and I think you have an audacious mission and vision. It needs to be hard to achieve. Done well, an audacious vision statement can move mountains. A colleague of mine says that a compelling vision enables the workforce to awaken their own purpose. So your purpose, what is your purpose, and how does the vision awaken your purpose, your power, and your potential? Think about that. Remember, Peace Health has a strong mission. The vision is also very strong, and it's that every person receives safe, compassionate care every time, every touch. Not some of the time, not most of the time, every time. And I'm telling you, maybe you know of an organization, but I don't know of an organization that can say they do quality even 100% of the time. We would never have a medical error if we had quality at 100% reliability. But isn't that an audacious vision? I tell you, it inspired me to come there to be part of, because that's the right work every time, every touch. And so imagine if we could get it 100%. Don't you think we would move mountains? Don't you think we would see the sparkle in people's eyes? I do. The values are the how of the organization and reflect the behaviors that you expect. They help you translate not only what you care about, but used effectively, they help create your culture and can be used to select, orient, and evaluate your staff. More on this later. Another of the essential reasons why I chose Thomas Cuisine and for the success of our relationship was the cultural fit. We had to buy into each other's mission, vision, and values, and we did. And that was really, really very special. It takes leadership from the CEOs, but it goes way beyond that. And it requires that everybody in leadership really have a buy-in to the mission, vision, and values of both the organizations. We both had a clear set of values, in fact, shared two in common. We both have the value of respect and of excellence. And when there was disagreement, which there will inevitably be, we could always turn to our values as well as our mission and vision to help resolve differences in opinion or other issues in our working relationship. Moreover, we could start with what we agree on rather than what we disagree on. I want you to think about this. It's an important point. If your conversation starts with what you disagree on, I promise you, it's going to be a very short conversation. But when you have the construct of mission, vision, and values as a starting place, it's much easier and effective to find common ground. Partnerships like this one are about putting the customer, the patient, in the center, not the middle. Think about this as well. It's subtle, but it's important. When you align around a common purpose, not a contract, different points of view begin to fade or be seen differently. Our partnership is around common work of food and nourishment, of feeding patients and staff. But it's bigger than that. How do we nourish our people? How does food improve the patient experience on a deeper level? How can we work together to meet the needs of the people that we're serving? That's our common purpose and should be the focus of all that we do and how we work together. This may seem simple, but it's not always the approach that's used in working, and when it's not, it's much harder to work together to find common ground. I can't emphasize this enough. Always look for common purpose. Always look for common ground. I don't know if you've read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but he says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is very similar, and I think very powerful. I think you would agree. Another aspect of the contractual relationship is that what you see depends on where you stand. You and I are both looking at this podium. I'm looking at the front of it, I see the microphone, and you see the front. I actually have no idea what's on the front of this podium, but we're both looking at the podium. We're just looking at it from different points of view. So how do you try to understand not only your own point of view, but your partner's point of view as well? And to do that, you're much more effective in resolving conflicts and reaching agreement versus only looking at your perspective. One thing that we see, Thomas Cuisine and Peace Health saw, is the experience that we wanted our customers to have. How do we rise above our individual interests for the common good and the common goal of patient experience? One way is authentic, unconditional service that connects people at a deep, personal, and emotional level. It resonates even with their soul, even if they don't know it, according to Mark Miller from High Performance Leadership. We all think we do this, but Mark suggests a few questions as part of a service audit. Are people inspired to tell their friends about the service they received, or worse, do they feel compelled to share bad experiences? Is service on your core metrics for your scorecards? Yes, it is. And do you evaluate how you make your customers feel? Service is different than hospitality, according to Scott Endicott. It's about creating a feeling in that guest. It's about a relationship between the server and the served. I had to think about this. A relationship between the server and the served. What does that involve? How do you do that? Think about companies that you really admire who do this very well. What comes to mind for you? Companies that are really good at service. Nordstrom, Ritz-Carlton, Starbucks. These are great. Well, a couple that I chose to call out today are Southwest Airlines and Chick-fil-A. I don't know what you think about Chick-fil-A. It probably doesn't jive with a lot of your things, but there's some things they do really well. Now, I have to tell you, I'm an Alaska devotee. I flew here on Alaska Airlines. I will fly back on Alaska Airlines. I'm at Gold 75, and I love Alaska Airlines. They are great. I love no cancellation fees, the ability to call and quickly get problems solved by somebody who I really believe is trying to help me. Like, the service on the call center is really quite good, and I quickly get my problems solved. I love being upgraded for no fees. That is quite a perk. But I have to say that there's something different in Southwest Airlines. It looks like they're having fun. It looks like they're enjoying taking care of their customers, and it's not the same at Alaska. I kind of wish it was. And again, it's not that Alaska's bad, but there's something different about Southwest Airlines. So it caused me to go to their website and look a little bit about their fundamental credos and mission, vision, and values. And I was not surprised to find what I did. The mission is dedicated to the highest quality of customer service, not surprising, dedicated with a sense of warmth. So I don't know that Alaska does or doesn't have a sense of warmth, but I do know that Southwest does. Friendliness, pride, and company spirit. This said a lot to me. They're also committed to their employees as a stable work environment and equal opportunity learning and growth, which I heard Mark talk about this morning as well. They talk about one heart and endless possibilities. And they go on to say that great heart, great soul, great business. The implication is that heart and soul create great business. So now mission is not just, the right thing for a company to do, but it actually, they are showing you that these behaviors actually result in better business, that these behaviors in their employees make a difference. And for them, it's personal. True story. My niece sells diamonds. Actually, she sells a lot of diamonds, like $1 million a year of diamonds. And one of her clients, she was telling me her client story, met at the Sacramento airport. And they got to talking, and they learned that each of them was going on a safari. Not the same one, but it was very interesting that, here at the Sacramento airport, two people are going on safaris. So they connected phone numbers and decided that they'd share notes with each other about the safari. And when they got back, they did. And they started dating, and they fell in love. And 2 years later, he bought a diamond from my niece. But he really wanted to make the proposal special and related to the Sacramento airport and traveling. And so he enlisted the Southwest staff in his proposal. And they very happily bought in. So once they got on the plane, they were drinking champagne and they were looking at pictures of their safaris and their last 2 years together, at which time the pilot came on the airwaves and said, "Excuse me, I'd like to have your attention. One of our customers has something very important to say." At which time he proposed to his now wife, and the entire plane broke out in applause and hoorays and whatever. This is a story that this couple and everybody on that plane will never forget. And Southwest Airlines participating in creating a story that I am now sharing with you about Southwest Airlines. So it's an unforgettable experience. It took no time, no energy, but it was a life-changing and unforgettable moment. At Chick-fil-A, their tagline is "a partnership you can trust." And the difference is in the details. Homemade taste without hassle. If you haven't been to a Chick-fil-A recently, let me fill you in. Every employee in that fast food chain greets you with a smile and is more than happy to serve you that chicken sandwich. This isn't because they feel they're just lucky at hiring people. It's because they instill their mission in every employee who takes that mission and lives it. We should be more than selling chickens. We should be helping our customers' lives in the communities that we serve, according to their website. Regarding their values, they're closed on Sunday because they think Sunday is a day of rest and worship. So that's how they live their values. True story again with my niece. She went to Chick-fil-A because she was late coming home from work to pick up some food for her kids, and when she got home, the whole order was messed up. She didn't have time to go back that night, but she did the next day. And the manager personally apologized, gave her a new meal and coupons for more food. But more importantly than the freebies was his apology was from the heart. And while it was her daughter's favorite place, it's now become one of her favorite places to go because of that customer experience. So the investment in developing employees, especially around mission, vision, and values, pays off not only because the customer satisfaction is high, and it's what stories are made of, there's a lower turnover, and to boot, which has payoff in so many ways. This takes deep commitment to your own company, and it takes commitment to do with a partner. It's hard to do by yourself. But when you're partnering with another organization, doing this bilaterally is really a big effort. But I believe it pays off. And it's why it's so important to get this right in the beginning when you're entertaining that contract. I can't emphasize this enough. So when you go into a new client, I urge you to learn everything you can about the organization, their mission, their vision, their values, their challenges and strategic priorities, so you can deeply understand the ways in which food can make a difference and help meet the organization's priorities. This is one of the things that made Thomas Cuisine stand out right from the beginning. Organizations may not see the connection themselves, so learn about what problems they're trying to solve so that you can deeply understand the ways in which food and your service and relationship can make a difference, thereby taking problems off the plate of leadership, so to speak. I want to shift now to the trends in healthcare, as Mark alluded to, and cast a vision on where food and healthcare is going. I'm sorry to tell you that the consolidation and downward pressure on cost is not only not going away, it's going to have even greater importance and accelerate. Healthcare costs are going in the wrong direction, so the pressure to reduce cost will continue, and that will be true for food services as well. For Thomas Cuisine to be successful, and for all of us to be successful, three things are really important. The first is a focus on controlling cost while maintaining excellence and quality. The second is sustainable growth and new revenue streams. And the third is the patient and customer experience. Each of these things by themselves is very difficult. To try and do cost, quality, growth, and experience together is really much easier said than done. So I'd like to take a moment and just go through the three areas for you. And I don't know that I'm going to have any new ideas, but I'd like to share a little of my thoughts about the three challenges of the future. So how do you reduce costs without sacrificing quality? It seems like an enigma. How is that even possible to do that? But you do have to find ways to do that. And that's why all of us have to do what my mother would say is put on your thinking cap. It's a tough problem, but everyone is facing it. The organizations that solve this conundrum will be the winners. I know you already do this, but look at meal prep, look at food storage, and the cost of food itself. How do you leverage this without sacrificing quality? Can you improve supply chain? What new preparation techniques might you employ to decrease the cost per meal, decrease prep and waste? I know you've done things like sous vide, but what other things can you do? How do you use automation? I see that you have a new tool Mark talked about with your app. How do you use technology? Is there a role for artificial intelligence in mining the patient's chart and looking for ways to have implications for food? So how do we have new ways to change how it's prepared, how it is stored, and how it's served? And another idea of this is not the usual, but I like to grow my way out of problems rather than cutting my way out of problems. So how do you use growth as a way of cutting cost? So I see some blank faces out of there. That doesn't make sense. How do you save money by doing more? And the way to do that is that if you can keep your meal costs the same, you can spread that fixed cost, right? The fixed costs are the same, and the more meals that you serve, the lower the total cost is. So then how do you have more food? So we get into how do we grow? Increasing the number of meals served to patients and in the cafeteria, especially when the cost doesn't go up, as I mentioned, will help you spread those costs. So in our experience, we increased patient meals. The volume of our medical center went up, but also we opened Grounds and Grains and we put in a wood stove and we had pizza, and all of a sudden those meals went up significantly. So the total cost went up, but the fixed cost got spread, and all in all, the cost per meal went down. So these are really ideas that you can look at. In terms of growth, one thing is, as I mentioned, it's easier to grow your way out of a problem than cut your way out of a problem. So how do you do this? Well, I will tell you, I have not seen many medical centers use food as a marketing strategy, but why not? Why not? I mean, if you're going to get heart surgery and it's going to be the same, wouldn't you want to go to the place where the food is better? I think so, but I haven't seen much work done here, so I think it's something we might want to think about is how do you use it as a strategy to grow the volume of the medical center. But how to use this strategy to bring people into the medical center? As I mentioned, people came to St. Joe's for no other reason but food. Are there new revenue opportunities? Like for us, the wood stove and Grounds and Grains made a huge difference. Could you sell meals to staff and visitors who don't have time to cook? You have such beautiful food. Why, instead of throwing it away or storing it, why don't you have grab and go that people could buy and market that as a new service line? What are the other ways that you could find to grow your services? I mean, growing outside of the hospitals. What about growing in the medical group? What about growing in the surgery center or the outpatient center? A lot of these places don't have food, and their employees have to leave. What if we provided food services and employees could stay in the place and enjoy some of the benefits I shared at the beginning of this talk? What about outside areas? I know you've gone into corporate dining, but what other areas are there as well? Senior services, post-acute. But what are things you might not have thought about in terms of growth? So third is the experience, and you've heard from my stories that experience is everything. So how do you have a great experience when you're growing? And how do you have a great experience when you're cutting or reducing cost? It's really quite a challenge, and it's something I think that we really have to kind of think deeply about. And how do you keep that patient experience first and foremost? It's really understanding what a first-class patient experience is and how you train and evaluate your staff to meet that special difference. How do you learn and experiment with new ways to improve experience or to be bolder? How do you set the bar in your industry to be the best practice for experience, growth, and cost? Let me share a few stories from my experience. I received many cards from many people on many different things, but one of the favorite cards I've ever received was about food services. They said, and I quote, "If the caregiver who served me could lasso the moon for me, I'm sure they would," end quote. Think about that. Is really powerful. This is a food server to a patient. It was so amazing that they took the time to write a note to the CEO. The caregiver what they did was they went above and beyond to make the patient feel good. And this is huge. The process of healing and the experience of care is enormous. The part you can play can make or break somebody's entire experience. And even if the heart surgery is successful, if the food experience is not, it's not going to be so great. But the converse is true. Even if the surgery wasn't so terrific, you can really make the experience memorable. So when I was preparing for this talk, I talked to one of my former assistants, and I said, what do you remember about Thomas Cuisine? And she actually had quite a long list. So here's the feedback from her. She said, when we called, they listened. Now that was different than when our own leaders were in food services than when Thomas Cuisine started leading the service. They owned the service. The coffee cart was more than a service. The barista knew all the regulars, and I swear they came just to see her as much as they came for the coffee. They always tried to make meals special. I mentioned that we had many special events, and they were really memorable. I can still see some of the trays of food in my backyard for leadership meetings. As I mentioned, I really felt like Joel and his team really worked hard to make sure that they were great reflections of me. You know, they did weird things. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but we had a cake made in the shape of a stethoscope. Now, maybe that's something you do everywhere, but I hadn't seen that before. So, it was a really, those are some really memorable experiences from Heather and from me. I hope this makes sense to you. I'm sure that you think about cost, quality, and service all the time. You likely talk about it all the time. But in short, balancing, improving, and maybe becoming the best practices in these three areas will really be a differentiator. And at the end of the day, it comes down to how do you balance mission and margin. On the positive side, some of the areas and markets that you've recently gone into will continue to grow. Did you know that 77 million baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964 plan to retire over the next 20 years? And I believe the post-acute sector and senior living will be in high demand and continue to grow. That's my generation, and remember, we love food. And we pick organizations and don't pick organizations for the food. Fun fact. I recently read that there are certain food that have no future with boomers. Any idea what might be included in those? Say again? Avocado toast? I don't know. That wasn't there, maybe. I kind of like avocado toast, but so canned food, margarine, fruitcake. Does anyone make fruitcake anymore? Jell-O salad, TV dinners, fake cheese, didn't know there was fake cheese, Vienna sausage, and others. So looking at trends like this and incorporating them into your brand, I think can be a really fun way to go. It's deeply understanding who you're serving, and that will make you essential for success. Price will be a factor, but the food experience will be more important. What can you do that's different than your competitors, beyond the usual? Things like offering cooking classes for health conditions like cardiac or diabetes may be an interesting idea in the right environment. It may not just be in the medical. Maybe corporate dining would like some cooking classes as well, so people who really have no time, never took time to learn, might really enjoy that. We have to find new ways to solve all problems, and we need innovation and creativity in sourcing, preparing, and presenting food. But no matter where the industry goes, in my opinion, this is a call for leadership at every level of the organization. As leaders within Thomas Cuisine, I invite you to think about yourself as the CEO of your area of responsibility. Think about that for a minute. The CEO of your area of responsibility. What does that mean? In aligning with the Thomas Cuisine mission, vision, and values, and with your partner's mission, vision, and values, it truly comes down to the basics. But this could be, I dare say, what differentiates you. As the CEO of your area of responsibility, think about yourself as the Chief Experience Officer, not only for your customers, but for the people you lead and serve. What does it mean to be the Chief Experience Officer? It means you need to focus on the experience your employees have first. Do they feel cared for and valued? How do you provide service to them? It also means leading across the organization. You need to transcend boundary lines to solve problems. An example, you may not be responsible for the cleanliness of the facility, but if you see trash, pick it up. If you see someone lost, walk them to their destination. It also means empowering your employees to do the same to solve problems. How do you assure that service and experience are inherent in everything that you do? I don't know if you've read a book called The Oz Principle. It's one of my favorites. And it talks about seeing it, owning it, solving it, and doing it. In contrast to ignoring it, denying it, it's not my job, finger pointing, Or my favorite is waiting and seeing if somebody else will do it, or the victim mentality. In contrast to the Oz principle, great leadership fosters ownership and accountability at every level of the organization. How can you continue to foster accountability across your organization? As I've been suggesting throughout this talk, that a strong organization is based on a compelling mission, an audacious vision, and a set of values that helps you shape a culture of the organization. You have that. You just heard Mark go through all the things you have in mission, vision, and values. But an important role of leadership is connecting the dots. What does it mean to connect the dots? Your mission is that to provide real food and genuine service in a cost-effective way while building enduring relationships. What I mean by connecting the dots is explaining that what you're doing or not doing through the lens of mission is a way of framing and explaining the decisions the organization's making, like, why are we expanding to different states or parts of the country? Why are we going into the corporate dining mode? The mission, vision, and values is a construct that you can use to explain these questions, as well as the why you say yes to one thing, but you say no to something else. The mission statement clearly explains why canned food is not on your go-to list, because you provide real food, even if it's more expensive to purchase or prepare. Another use of mission, vision, and values is inspiring people to be their best, to own the work, to align with the why of the work, which is another way of aligning with mission. Remember the examples I shared with Peace Health, Chick-fil-A, and Southwest. Yours is awesome, but how do we make sure that the mission, vision, values is no longer a poster on the wall, but becomes the water in which we all swim, not just the leadership? Your vision is to be the best business partner for your customers, associates, suppliers, and is also useful in connecting the dots. And it explains why Thomas Cuisine was the partner St. Joseph Medical Center chose. We could sense your commitment to the partnership. The same is true for values. How will you continue to use them as a guide in what you do and what you don't do? How will you How will you use them in selecting new employees, in orienting them and evaluating them as well as yourself? What are the behaviors you need to exhibit and expect from your staff that embody excellence or respect, integrity, teamwork, and passion? Have you broken those down into behavioral standards? And what do those values look like? And what do they not look like? What does it look like to not have passion? Leadership is also about creating followership. You can't do everything yourself, much as we try. Command and control will work for a short time, but to have sustained results, to have the growth that Mark's talking about, you need buy-in and ownership, and followership is required. Creating a culture of accountability can be very, very powerful. And when that is in place, everyone leads, and everyone knows what is to be done, why it's to be done, and how to hold each other accountable. How can you use your mission, vision, and values as motivation, as context, and filter and screen for everything you say yes to and everything you say no to? No one said that leadership was easy, but to live your values, to be accountable to your mission and vision, requires ownership and accountability. But what happens when people don't live the mission and values? Having what is sometimes a difficult conversation may come next. How do you have these conversations in a respectful way with integrity? How do you describe what excellence, integrity, teamwork are, and how individuals are or are not living them? If this is not something that you're comfortable doing, I suggest that you begin working on it. There are several books I'd recommend, including Crucial Conversations. Many people have seen that. But I also really love Thanks for the Feedback and Radical Candor. These are resources to get you started. Coaching is another alternative. I'll share a story about Mary, a coaching client I had several years ago. She'd been a leader in the organization for more than 10 years and had grown in that organization. Unfortunately, she was missing some very key performance targets. And even though she was significantly behind herself in her compensation, the organization withheld her raise because they were so dissatisfied. Mary was not happy about this, and she was also not happy with the fact that I was hired to coach her, so she started looking for a job. Part of the problem is that she was having trouble holding people accountable, and as a result, she took on more work herself. I know I have done that. I bet many of you have as well. This left her with an overflowing plate that was simply not possible to get everything done. By using mission, vision, and values, she could begin to explain why and what she needed from her team and how she would measure success. This was very helpful for her team because they hadn't fully understood her request or what success looked like. She was also able to clarify her expectations about behavior, like getting back to her if something hadn't been completed. In addition, her team had to understand why she was asking them to do certain things. By framing her request in the context of how it would help her departments to achieve the organization's mission, vision, values, they now had a why to what she was asking them to do. I'm happy to tell you that at the end of our time working together on this and so many other areas, she and the organization grew so significantly, they not only granted her raise, but gave it to her retroactively 6 months. And while she was offered the other job, she declined it. So the happy moral of the story is both the organization and Mary won. Both of them saved themselves a difficult transition and saved a fair amount of money for both of them in the transition that might have ensued. But with or without coaching, developing leadership skills is a journey. I've spent my entire career developing and refining mine. As we find ourselves making our way towards the end of this talk, I want to share another strategy and a tool I hope you're going to find useful. We've talked about employing mission, vision, and values to motivate, but there are other strategies that are important in difficult conversations as well. To do that, I'd like to now focus on communication. When we think about communication, we usually think about talking or sharing our point of view, making sure that we're clear. But listening with intent to understand is even more important. And listening, as it turns out, is a total of what you hear, understand, and remember. Listening is an even deeper component of communication, and unfortunately, many of us could improve our listening skills. According to the University of Missouri, listening is the most commonly used communication skill, accounting for 45%. I didn't know that. 45% of communication is listening, and talking is only 30%. Reading is 16%, and writing is 9%. But unfortunately, most of us are very poor and inefficient listeners. Why is this? There are several reasons. The first is that listening, while the most frequently used, is the one we've had the least training in. The second is that most of us can think faster than someone can speak. Now, I'm a fast speaker, but I'm sure more than once during the talk you have had your mind wandering because your mind is faster than any speaker can speak. So as a result, our minds are wandering, and unless we're making a concerted effort to listen intently, our minds are going to go somewhere else. This is really hard work. And commonly, many of us are thinking about our response before the other person has finished their thought, leaving us with incomplete information. Have you ever done that? I know I'm guilty of it. Often, when we're in a difficult conversation, beyond the natural listening difficulties I just described, we often stop listening because we get irritated or annoyed or frustrated in some way, and we start focusing on our point of view and what we're going to say next. This is not helpful. An alternative I recommend is the idea or concept and strategy of inquiry versus advocacy. What I mean by this is shifting from expressing your point of view to eliciting theirs. Instead of telling them what you think and why you think what they did was wrong or dumb, start asking their perspective. Why did you think that was a good idea? Have you seen this done before? What results were you expecting or hoping for? Tools like this can help facilitate deeper understanding as better communication and better cooperation, but it takes time and practice. How do you use these tools with difficult people? I want you now to think about somebody you're working with who's difficult, and there's nobody who doesn't have somebody in their life who's difficult to work with. What do you want to communicate with them? Think about, what do you want them to think about? How could you use inquiry versus advocacy to help? What questions might you ask them? I'd like you to talk to somebody nearby you for just a few minutes each, 2 or 3 minutes each, and I'd like you to talk about somebody you're having trouble working with. Ask the person next to you, see if they have any ideas on how you could lead with mission, vision, and values, and how you might incorporate inquiry versus advocacy into your leadership toolkit. So go ahead and start. I hope it doesn't take too much for you to think about somebody you want to communicate about. And 2 minutes each, and then we'll do some sharing. How about somebody else? Did anyone try inquiry versus advocacy? No? I hope you do. It's really such a powerful tool. It's so easy to go into a conversation with your own set of thoughts and ideas. And when you can suspend them and let them go and try and get into that kind of learner's mindset, like instead of like, why did you do that? But like, why did you do that? What were, really what were you thinking about? What were you hoping for? Instead of asking in an accusatory way, really trying to get to what was underneath it and what made somebody think that was a good idea. Because sometimes there actually might have been a good idea underneath it, but it was just not done well. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, thanks, Hilly. Really well said. Just the act of listening changes how somebody feels. And I'm going to close with kind of a Maya Angelou quote on that. So how somebody feels is really influenced by the aspect of listening. Many people, when you ask them, they do not feel listened to, and they do not feel heard. And so as a leader, really listening with the intent to understand is a very powerful leadership skill. Okay, well, I'm going to summarize that experience is everything, and creating the right experience with the people that you lead is grounded in what matters most: who you are, what you do, and how you do it. Aligning with each of these things, mission, vision, and values, with your customers' needs and wants is vital to success. At the end of the day, and to close, I will quote Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This will be the differentiator with your staff, your clients, and ultimately the people that you serve. How can you be sure that they remember how you made them feel? Thank you so much for your time today. It was a privilege to be with you.